3 months from now, my wife will be standing in a room full of people who used to respect her, watching everything she built come apart in real time. But right now, in this moment, she thinks she's won. She's standing in our kitchen with a glass of wine in her hand and complete certainty in her voice, delivering an announcement she expects me to simply accept. "I'm not sleeping with you again, Garrett. I need you to deal with that." She's rehearsed this. I can tell by the way she won't make eye contact, the way her shoulders are set like she's bracing for impact that never comes. She thinks I'm going to argue, plead, ask what I did wrong. Instead, something quiet and cold settles into my chest like a lock engaging. And in that silence, the silence she mistakes for defeat, I realize I'd been waiting for permission to stop pretending. She wanted me to deal with it. I'm about to deal with it in ways she never imagined. Before I take you back to how all of this started, tell me the time and where you're watching from. I always love seeing how far my stories travel. Consider liking and subscribing, but only if this one earns it. Now, let me walk you back a bit. The house in Charlotte was supposed to be our forever home, one of those renovated craftsman-style places in Dilworth that cost more than either of us would admit out loud, but looked incredible in photos. Meredith had designed the interior herself. She's a senior designer at Whitmore & Associates, the kind of firm that handles million-dollar residential projects and makes sure everyone knows it. I'm the operations director for Piedmont Hospitality Group. We run 14 boutique hotels across the Carolinas. On paper, we look like the couple other couples wanted to become. 8 years of marriage, no kids, Meredith always had reasons to wait. A social calendar filled with charity galas and industry events where we smiled for cameras and pretended we still touched each other when nobody was watching. The truth is, I'd felt something shifting for months. The late nights at client sites, the weekend design consultations that never seemed to include me anymore. The way she'd started sleeping on the far edge of our king-sized bed like she was afraid of accidental contact. But I told myself stories. Stress, work pressure, a rough patch we'd navigate like adults. Standing in that kitchen, watching her deliver her verdict without even the courtesy of looking at me, I realized I'd been lying to myself for longer than I wanted to admit. "Did you hear me?" She finally glanced up, irritation flickering across her face. I wasn't following her script. "I heard you." "And?" I studied her for a moment, the sharp blazer she wore like armor, the perfect makeup, the complete absence of guilt or uncertainty in her expression. This wasn't a woman confessing something difficult. This was a woman issuing a corporate memo. "Okay," I said. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "Okay? You've made your decision. I'll deal with it." I walked past her, up the stairs, into the bedroom we'd shared for 5 years. I pulled out a duffel bag and started packing. Clothes for a week, toiletries, my laptop, the folder of important documents I kept in my desk, insurance policies, investment statements, the post-nup we'd signed when we bought this house. Meredith appeared in the doorway, wine glass still in hand, looking genuinely confused for the first time. "What are you doing?" "Dealing with it." "Garrett, I didn't mean—" "You said what you meant, Meredith. You were very clear." I zipped the bag and grabbed my keys from the nightstand. "I'm going to stay somewhere else while I process this." "That's not— I thought we could talk about arrangements, how to make this work for both of us." I almost laughed. Almost. "We can talk through attorneys." I walked past her again, down the stairs, through the front door. She didn't follow me, probably still processing the fact that I hadn't begged, hadn't cried, hadn't asked what I did wrong. The thing about people who expect you to crumble is that they never have a backup plan for when you don't. Owen didn't ask questions when I showed up at his townhouse in South End with a duffel bag and a face that probably said everything words couldn't. We'd worked together at Piedmont for 6 years before he moved to a competitor. The kind of friendship that survives career changes and doesn't require constant maintenance. He took one look at me, stepped aside, and pointed toward the guest room. "Beer's in the fridge, bourbon's on the counter. Guest room's got clean sheets." "Thanks. You want to talk about it?" "Not yet." He nodded like that was exactly the answer he expected. "I'll be in the living room if you change your mind." That night, while Owen watched some basketball game I couldn't focus on, I sat at his kitchen table with my laptop and started doing something I should have done months ago. I logged into every joint account, every credit card, every investment platform. I pulled statements, made spreadsheets, documented balances. By midnight, I had a complete picture of our financial life, and some details that made my stomach tighten in ways I couldn't fully explain yet. Meredith had been spending more than usual. Restaurants I didn't recognize, charges at hotels in Asheville and Charleston that didn't match any work trips she'd mentioned, a recurring charge at a boutique in Myers Park that sold the kind of lingerie she hadn't worn for me in over a year. Something didn't sit right. No, something sat exactly right. Something I'd been refusing to see because seeing it would mean accepting that my marriage had been dead long before her announcement tonight. I transferred my personal savings, the accounts that predated our marriage and remained in my name only, to a new account at a different bank, set up alerts on every joint card, created a secure folder on my laptop, and started organizing everything chronologically. I wasn't being paranoid, I was being prepared. There's a difference, even if the line between them gets blurry at 2 in the morning. Owen appeared in the kitchen doorway around 1:30, grabbed a glass of water, and glanced at my screen without commenting on the spreadsheets. "You doing okay?" "I'm doing something." "That's usually better than nothing." He leaned against the counter. "Meredith?" "She gave me an ultimatum tonight about our relationship. Physical relationship." Owen's expression shifted slightly, not surprise exactly, more like confirmation of something he suspected. "You left." "And I left." Most guys would have stayed and argued. Most guys would still be hoping this was fixable. I stopped hoping about 3 months ago. I just didn't realize it until tonight. Owen was quiet for a moment. "You think she's—" "I don't know what I think yet, but I'm going to find out." He nodded slowly. "You need a lawyer?" "I need the best divorce attorney in Charlotte, someone who doesn't care about being fair or amicable, someone who cares about winning." "I know exactly who you need to call." He grabbed a pen from the counter, scribbled a name and number on a napkin, and slid it across the table. "Cynthia Holt, Holt & Associates. She handled my brother's divorce last year. His ex tried to take everything, including the business. Cynthia left her with a studio apartment and a payment plan." I looked at the napkin for a long moment. "She's expensive," Owen added, "but she's worth it." At this point, expensive is just another word for investment. I folded the napkin and put it in my pocket. Tomorrow, I'd make the call. Tonight, I'd finish documenting everything I could access. Because here's what I was starting to understand. Meredith delivered her announcement like someone who'd already planned the next phase, like someone who expected me to fall in line while she executed a strategy I wasn't supposed to see. But I'd been running operations for a hospitality group for 8 years. I knew exactly what it looked like when someone was managing a situation instead of having a conversation. And I knew what happened when you let someone else control the narrative. The question wasn't whether something was going on. The question was how deep it went, and whether I had enough time to prepare before Meredith realized I wasn't going to play the role she had assigned me. Cynthia Holt's office was on the 14th floor of a glass tower in uptown Charlotte, the kind of building where the hourly rates start at numbers that would make most people reconsider their life choices. The reception area had the polished, intimidating aesthetic of a place that expected clients to arrive with problems money could solve. I'd called first thing in the morning. Cynthia's assistant had asked a few questions about my situation, then put me on hold for less than a minute before offering me an appointment that same afternoon. That told me everything I needed to know about how they triaged new clients. Calm and prepared got you in the door faster than hysterical and desperate. Cynthia was mid-40s, sharp-featured, with the kind of direct eye contact that suggested she'd heard every lie imaginable and had stopped being impressed by any of them. She shook my hand firmly, gestured to a leather chair across from her desk, and asked me to tell her why I was there. I gave her the facts in under 5 minutes. Wife announced the physical part of our marriage was over. No discussion, no therapy suggestion, just a unilateral decision. I'd left that same night. 8 years married, together for 10, no children, house in both names, joint accounts, the whole suburban success story package. I also told her about the spending patterns I'd noticed, the hotel charges, the restaurant receipts, the things that didn't quite add up. Cynthia listened without interrupting, making occasional notes on a legal pad. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. "Do you have a prenuptial agreement?" "Post-nup. We signed it 3 years into the marriage when we combined finances to buy our house and an investment property." "Who drafted it?" "Her father. He's a retired real estate attorney. Very thorough." Something shifted in Cynthia's expression, a flicker of interest that hadn't been there before. "Do you have a copy with you?" I pulled the document from my folder and slid it across the desk. Cynthia picked it up and started reading with the focused attention of a surgeon examining an X-ray. Her father had insisted on that post-nup, actually. He'd been through his own divorce decades ago, a nasty one that left him permanently suspicious of anyone who married into his family. At the time, I'd assumed he was trying to protect Meredith from me, assumed the document was designed to limit my claims if things went wrong. I signed it without fighting because I loved her and thought we'd never need it. Cynthia turned to the third page, then the fourth. I watched her eyes move across the clauses, watched her expression remain carefully neutral. Then she reached a section near the end and the corner of her mouth twitched. If she were the type to smile in front of clients, that would have been the moment. "Mr. Price," she said slowly, looking up at me with those calculating eyes. "Did you actually read this document before you signed it?" "I read most of it. Meredith's father walked us through the key points." "Did he walk you through Section 12? "I don't remember. What does it say?" Cynthia set the document down and folded her hands on top of it. "Section 12 contains a clause about material breach of marital trust. It was probably intended to protect your wife in case she had an affair or engaged in financial misconduct." She paused. "But the language is gender neutral. It applies equally to both parties." "What does that mean exactly?" "It means that if either spouse can demonstrate infidelity, hidden financial arrangements, or deliberate deception regarding the marriage, the breaching party forfeits their claim to the majority of marital assets acquired during the marriage, including real estate." The words hung in the air between us. "Her father put that in there to protect her," I said slowly. "Her father put it in there assuming she'd never be the one who breached the agreement." Cynthia's voice was calm, almost clinical. "If your suspicions are correct, if she's been unfaithful, this document becomes the most valuable piece of paper you own." I sat with that for a moment. The irony was almost beautiful in a devastating way. "But I need proof." "You need proof," Cynthia confirmed. "If she's cheating and we can document it, this divorce will be swift, decisive, and very much in your favor. If she's not, or if we can't prove it, things become considerably more complicated and expensive." She leaned forward slightly. "My advice, take some time, be smart. Don't confront her or give any indication that you're building a case. Let her think you're processing the situation emotionally. People who believe they've won become careless." I nodded slowly. "And, Mr. Price, when you find what you're looking for, because your instincts are usually right in situations like this, bring it directly to me. We'll handle everything from there." I left Cynthia's office with a retainer agreement, a strategy session scheduled for the following week, and a mission. The woman I'd married thought she delivered an announcement I had no choice but to accept. She had no idea she'd handed me a weapon. All I needed now was ammunition. 2 days later, I went back to the house. I'd been tracking Meredith's calendar through our shared family account, one of those conveniences of modern marriage that people forget about when they're busy hiding things. She had a client presentation downtown that would keep her occupied until at least 4. Plenty of time. The house felt different when I walked in. Not physically, everything was exactly where I'd left it. Same furniture, same carefully curated artwork, same lingering scent of the candles Meredith burned obsessively because she'd read somewhere that successful people had signature home fragrances. But it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like evidence. I wasn't there to wallow or second-guess myself. I was there to find proof. Meredith was meticulous about her main devices. Her phone never left her side and her work laptop was always with her or locked in her home office. But there's a funny thing about people who think they're smarter than everyone else. They forget about the old devices, the ones they replaced but never bothered to wipe because they were too busy being brilliant to worry about loose ends. Her old iPad was exactly where I remembered it, charging on a shelf in the home office, buried behind some design magazines she'd never thrown away. She'd upgraded to a newer model about 8 months ago, right around the time her behavior started shifting. The old one just sat there, forgotten, still logged into her Apple ID. Still syncing. I picked it up, entered her passcode, our anniversary because of course it was, and watched as months of messages, photos, and emails populated the screen like a confession she never intended to make. My hands didn't shake, my heart didn't race. I just sat down in her ergonomic desk chair and started scrolling. What I found in the next hour would have destroyed me 3 months earlier, but standing there in our home office, I wasn't heartbroken anymore. I was documenting. The messages started in March, 7 months ago, right around the time Meredith had taken on a new commercial project, a boutique hotel renovation in Asheville that she'd described as career-defining. The client's name was Victor Crane. The first few exchanges were professional enough, design concepts, material selections, timeline discussions, but somewhere around late April, the tone shifted. The messages got longer, more personal. The kind of conversations that start with, "I really appreciate your vision," and end with hotel room numbers. By May, they weren't pretending anymore. I screenshotted everything, every message, every photo, every incriminating detail. I backed them up to my secure cloud account, copied them to a flash drive, and sent duplicates to a new email address I'd created specifically for this purpose. The iPad had given me exactly what I needed, but I wasn't done reading yet, because the messages didn't just prove she was cheating. They proved something far worse. Victor Crane's name appeared in over 2,000 messages spanning 7 months. By the time I finished reading, I knew more about him than I'd ever wanted to know about anyone. 43 years old, boutique hotel developer with properties across the Southeast, divorced twice, which should have been a red flag for anyone paying attention, but Meredith had apparently decided that third time's the charm when it came to men who couldn't maintain relationships. His LinkedIn profile made him look like a visionary. His text messages made him look like a man who'd perfected the art of telling married women exactly what they wanted to hear. The affair had followed a predictable pattern. First came the compliments, how talented Meredith was, how underappreciated, how someone with her gifts deserved more recognition. Then came the confessions, how he'd never met anyone who understood him, how his previous marriages had failed because his ex-wives couldn't handle his ambition. Then came the promises, weekends in Charleston, dinners at restaurants where no one would recognize them, a future where Meredith could finally be with someone who truly saw her. It was manipulation disguised as romance, and Meredith had swallowed every word. But the messages that hit hardest weren't the romantic ones. They were the ones about me. In June, after one of our rare attempts at intimacy, Meredith had texted Victor, "Had to perform my wifely duties tonight. Felt like going through the motions with a stranger. Can't wait to see you this weekend and remember what actual connection feels like." Victor's response, "You deserve so much more than a hotel manager who peaked in his 20s. Soon, baby, soon." Hotel manager, that's what she called me to her lover. Not operations director, not the man who'd helped build a regional hospitality empire, a hotel manager who peaked in his 20s. There was more, Meredith describing our marriage as a holding pattern until something better came along. Victor joking about how I was financially useful but emotionally absent. Both of them laughing about how oblivious I seemed, how easy it was to schedule their weekends around my work trips, how Meredith could come home smelling like another man and I'd never notice because I was too busy managing hotels. If that last part made your chest tighten, you already understand why people subscribe to stories like this. You've been here, or you've been close. The contempt was breathtaking. Not the affair itself. People cheat. It's ugly but human. It was the casual cruelty of it, the jokes at my expense, the complete lack of guilt while she slept next to me every night, spent money from our joint accounts, and planned a future that didn't include me. One exchange in particular stuck with me, from the week before her ultimatum. "I'm going to tell him this week about the physical part. I'll frame it as a personal boundary thing, not about us. He'll be confused, but he'll accept it. That's what he does, accepts things." And then? Then we wait. Let him get used to the new normal. When I finally ask for the divorce, he'll be relieved. We keep the house, split everything 50-50, and I walk away clean. You really think he's that passive? Baby, I've been managing Garrett for 8 years. He's not going to suddenly grow a spine now. I sat in that office chair for a long time after reading that exchange. Not because it hurt, though it did, somewhere underneath the ice that had settled into my chest, but because I finally understood exactly what I was dealing with. This wasn't a woman who'd made a mistake and fallen for someone else. This was a calculated exit strategy. She'd been planning this for months, engineering the perfect conditions for a divorce that would leave her with maximum assets and minimal consequences. She underestimated me completely, and that was going to cost her everything. Meredith called me 4 days after I'd left, not to apologize or ask where I was staying, but to propose what she called a mature conversation between adults. She suggested coffee at a place in South End, neutral territory, public enough to discourage emotional outbursts, quiet enough for a serious discussion. I agreed immediately, keeping my voice soft and uncertain, the wounded husband still processing his wife's rejection. It wasn't hard to play that role. I'd been playing roles in this marriage for years without realizing it. She was already seated when I arrived, dressed in one of her power outfits, structured blazer, tasteful jewelry, the kind of put-together aesthetic that projected confidence and control. She had a latte in front of her and that expression she always wore in client meetings, warm but detached, approachable but in charge. "Thanks for coming," she said as I sat down. "I know this is hard." "It's confusing," I said carefully. "I'm still trying to understand what happened." Meredith leaned forward, her expression softening into something that almost looked like genuine care. Almost. "Garrett, you didn't do anything wrong. This is about me, about what I need to feel fulfilled and authentic in my life." She paused, letting the words settle. "I've been doing a lot of self-reflection lately, working with a therapist, and I've realized that traditional relationships don't align with who I am anymore." Traditional relationships, that's what she was calling our marriage now. What does that mean exactly? "It means I think we can evolve together." She reached across the table and touched my hand, a gesture so rehearsed I could almost see the stage directions. "We could stay married, legally, financially, but give each other the freedom to pursue authentic connections outside our relationship." I blinked at her. "You mean an open marriage?" "I prefer to think of it as a modern arrangement. We'd still be partners, still share the house, the accounts, the life we've built, but without the pressure of physical expectations that neither of us is really feeling anymore." The audacity was almost impressive. She wanted to keep everything, my income, the house, the social respectability of being married, while having complete freedom to continue her affair with Victor. And she was presenting this like it was a gift, an enlightened evolution that I should be grateful she was offering. Type "I saw it coming" in the comments if you knew exactly what she was doing. "That's a lot to consider," I said slowly, keeping my voice uncertain. "I know it sounds unconventional, but I really believe this could work for both of us. We could be honest with each other for the first time in years." Honest. The woman who'd been sleeping with someone else for 7 months wanted to talk about honesty. I let the silence stretch, let her see me struggling with the decision. Then I nodded slowly, reluctantly, like a man who didn't love the idea but was too beaten down to fight it. "Can I have some time to think about it?" Relief flooded her face. "Of course, take all the time you need. I just wanted to put the option on the table." She squeezed my hand again, told me she was proud of how mature I was being, how she'd been worried I'd react badly. I gave her a sad little smile that suggested I was struggling but trying to be supportive. She left that coffee shop thinking she'd won, thinking she'd successfully maneuvered me into a holding pattern while she figured out the perfect exit strategy. What she didn't know was that Cynthia Holt had already reviewed every piece of evidence I'd gathered. What she didn't know was that we'd mapped out a strategy down to the smallest detail. What she didn't know was that her smug confidence was about to become the most expensive mistake of her life. She thought I was the same passive husband she'd been managing for 8 years. She was about to meet someone very different. Cynthia called me 3 days after my coffee performance with Meredith. Her voice had that particular edge it got when she'd found something interesting. "My investigator finished his background work on Victor Crane," she said. "You're going to want to sit down for this." I was already sitting in Owen's guest room, but I appreciated the warning. What did he find? Victor Crane isn't divorced. He's married, has been for 11 years to a woman named Deborah Crane, née Patterson. They have 2 children together, ages 8 and 6. They live in a very nice house in Raleigh, and by all appearances, Deborah has no idea her husband has been sleeping with your wife for the past 7 months. I let that sink in for a moment. So Meredith isn't even the main event. She's the side piece. It appears that way. And based on some additional digging, she's not the first. Victor has a pattern. Married women, usually in creative or design fields, usually involved in his hotel projects. He runs the same playbook every time, makes them feel special, makes promises about leaving his wife, then vanishes when things get complicated. The irony was almost too perfect. Meredith thought she'd found her great escape, her authentic connection, her soulmate who truly understood her. What she'd actually found was a serial cheater who collected married women like trophies and discarded them the moment they became inconvenient. Moments like this are exactly why I pay attention now, because the truth doesn't always show up the way you expect, and the people who seem untouchable usually have the most to hide. "So does this change anything legally?" I asked. Not for your case. We already have more than enough to invoke the post-nup clause, but it does give us something valuable, leverage, if she tries to fight. And it confirms that Victor Crane will disappear the moment he realizes he might get dragged into a legal proceeding. Men like him don't stick around when consequences show up. I thought about Meredith's messages, the confidence she had in Victor, the future they'd planned together, the way she talked about him like he was going to rescue her from the prison of our marriage. She had no idea she'd traded one disappointment for another. "So what's our next move?" I asked. "We file," Cynthia said, "but we choose the moment carefully. I want maximum impact, something that makes it clear you're not the passive husband she's been describing to her lover." I thought about Meredith's calendar, the events she'd been planning for months, the ones she'd been most excited about. "She has a design showcase next week," I said slowly. "Her firm is unveiling a major project, some luxury condo development she's been lead design on, big industry event, press coverage, all her colleagues and clients in one room." Cynthia was quiet for a moment. "That's aggressive." She served me an ultimatum in our kitchen without consideration for my feelings. She's been planning to take half of everything while mocking me to her affair partner. She told Victor I'd never grow a spine. Fair point. I could hear the smile in Cynthia's voice. "I'll make the arrangements. And Garrett, after the papers are served, don't engage with her. Don't answer calls, don't respond to texts. Everything goes through me from this point forward." I agreed and ended the call. For a moment, I just sat there in Owen's guest room, processing everything. My wife had been having an affair with a married man who had no intention of leaving his actual family for her. She'd been planning to divorce me and take half of our assets while I remained oblivious. She'd been so confident in her own superiority that she documented everything on a device she forgot existed. And now, in less than a week, her carefully constructed world was going to collapse in front of everyone she'd spent years trying to impress. I should have felt something. Guilt, maybe, for what I was about to do, or satisfaction at the justice of it, or sadness for the marriage we once had. But all I felt was that cold, patient calm that had settled into my chest the night she delivered her ultimatum. She wanted me to deal with it. I was dealing with it. The Whitmore & Associates Design Showcase was held at a converted warehouse space in South End, the kind of venue that screamed creative excellence to anyone paying attention. Exposed brick, industrial lighting, strategically placed greenery, everything designed to make wealthy clients feel like they were investing in art, not just interior decoration. I wasn't there in person. Cynthia had advised against it, and she was right. My presence would have been a distraction. Might have tipped Meredith off before the papers arrived. Instead, I waited at Owen's place, tracking the event through social media posts and the occasional update from Cynthia's process server. The event started at 6 p.m. Cocktail hour, networking, the usual industry mingling. Meredith's presentation was scheduled for 7:30, the prime slot, reserved for the firm's most impressive project reveal. I'd seen her practice this presentation, the luxury condo development she'd been working on for 18 months, her biggest project to date. She'd spent weeks perfecting every slide, every talking point, every carefully choreographed moment designed to establish her as one of the firm's rising stars. She had no idea it was also going to be the moment her marriage officially ended. The process server was a professional named Dennis who'd been doing this work for 15 years. According to Cynthia, he had a talent for accessing difficult venues and maintaining composure in hostile situations. He'd posed as a catering staff member to get through the door, simple enough at an event with dozens of temporary workers moving through the space. At 7:42 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Cynthia. "Papers delivered, confirmed receipt." I stared at those 3 words for a long moment. It was done. According to Dennis's report, which Cynthia forwarded to me an hour later, Meredith had been mid-sentence when he approached. Something about creating spaces that reflect authentic living. The irony wasn't lost on me. He'd waited for a natural pause, stepped forward, and handed her the envelope with the standard declaration, "You've been served." The room had gone quiet. Meredith had looked confused at first, probably assuming it was some kind of mistake. Then she'd opened the envelope, seen the heading on the first page, "Petition for Dissolution of Marriage," and her face had gone white. Dennis noted that she'd tried to maintain composure, had actually attempted to continue her presentation for about 30 seconds before her voice cracked. She'd excused herself, walked out of the room with the papers clutched in her hands, and hadn't returned. Someone else from the firm had apparently stepped in to finish the presentation. The event continued because industry events always continue, but the buzz had shifted from Meredith's brilliant design work to whatever personal drama had just unfolded in front of 200 witnesses. My phone started lighting up around 8:30. 3 missed calls from Meredith, then 5, then a string of increasingly frantic text messages that escalated from confused to furious to desperate in the span of 30 minutes. What the hell is this? You served me at work in front of everyone? Call me right now. We need to talk. Garrett, this is insane. You can't just do this. I know you're seeing these. Call me. I didn't respond. Cynthia had been clear. No contact, no explanations, no engagement. Everything I said could be used in proceedings, and we'd already said everything we needed to say through legal documents. The papers included copies of the most damaging messages, her texts to Victor about managing me, the hotel receipts charged to our joint accounts, the timeline showing she'd been planning this exit for months while still enjoying the benefits of our marriage. She wanted me to deal with her ultimatum quietly, passively, like the spineless husband she'd described to her lover. Instead, I'd responded with paperwork that would cost her the house, the assets, and the carefully maintained image she'd spent years constructing. By midnight, Meredith had called 11 more times. I turned off my phone and went to sleep. Tomorrow would bring more chaos, more desperate attempts to regain control. But tonight, for the first time in months, I slept without the weight of uncertainty pressing down on my chest. The game she thought she was playing had just ended. But I had a feeling she hadn't fully understood the score yet. She showed up at Owen's place 2 nights later. I don't know how she found out I was staying there. Probably called everyone we both knew until someone slipped, but there she was at 9 p.m., standing on Owen's doorstep looking nothing like the polished designer who'd pitched her open marriage fantasy a week earlier. Her makeup was smeared, her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail instead of its usual precise styling. She was wearing yoga pants and an old sweater, clothes I hadn't seen her wear in public in years. The confidence that had always defined her presence was gone, replaced by something desperate and brittle. Owen answered the door, took one look at her, and called back to me without letting her inside. I came to the doorway but didn't invite her in. "Garrett, we need to talk." Her voice was hoarse, like she'd been crying or yelling or both. "This is insane. You can't just serve me divorce papers at work in front of my colleagues. Do you have any idea what you've done to my reputation?" The irony of her worrying about reputation while facing evidence of a 7-month affair wasn't lost on me, but I kept my expression neutral. "Everything in those papers is documented, Meredith. Messages, receipts, the timeline. You can discuss the details with your attorney." "I don't want to discuss it with an attorney. I want to discuss it with you, my husband." "I think you forfeited the right to that conversation when you started sleeping with Victor Crane 7 months ago." She flinched at his name, actually flinched like I'd slapped her. It's not what you think. Victor and I, we have a connection, something you and I haven't had in years. I was going to tell you eventually, I just needed—" "You needed time to position yourself for a favorable divorce while I remained oblivious." I pulled out my phone and showed her a screenshot, one of the messages where she described her strategy to Victor. "You wrote it yourself. Quote, 'We keep the house, split everything 50-50, and I walk away clean,' unquote." She stared at the screen, her face cycling through shock, then anger, then something that might have been shame if she were capable of it. "You went through my messages. That's a violation of my privacy." "That iPad was marital property in our shared home, and the post-nup your father drafted includes a clause about full disclosure of activities that could affect the marriage. The moment you started lying about your whereabouts and using joint funds to finance your affair, you violated that clause. Your father's clause was meant to protect me from you." Turns out the language works both ways. She tried everything after that. Anger first. How dare I humiliate me? I'd regret this. I was being vindictive and cruel. When that didn't work, she switched to tears, explaining that the affair didn't mean anything, that she still cared about me, that we could work through this if I just gave her a chance. When I still didn't respond, she shifted to bargaining. "I'll end things with Victor immediately. We can go to counseling. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." "Have you talked to Victor lately?" Something flickered across her face. Uncertainty. He's been busy, work travel, but he changed his phone number 3 days ago, deleted his social media. His secretary told Cynthia's investigator that he's unavailable indefinitely for any matters related to your divorce." I watched the realization hit her. The man she'd thrown away our marriage for, the authentic connection she was so certain about, had vanished the moment things got complicated, exactly like Cynthia predicted. That's not, he He's also still married, 11 years, 2 kids. You weren't his escape plan, Meredith. You were his entertainment." She looked like I'd knocked the wind out of her. For a moment, I almost felt something, not sympathy exactly, but recognition. She'd been played by someone better at manipulation than she was. There was a certain poetic justice in that. "You wanted freedom," I said quietly. "You wanted to be authentic, to live without constraints. Congratulations, you're about to have all of that." "Garrett, please." The post-nup is clear. Section 12, material breach of marital trust. Your father made sure the language was ironclad. I stepped back toward the door. You made your choices, now you get to live with the consequences. I closed the door while she was still standing there. Through the window, I watched her stand on the porch for nearly 2 minutes, probably trying to decide whether to knock again or leave. Eventually, she walked back to her car and drove away. Owen handed me a beer without comment. The court proceedings moved faster than I had expected. Meredith hired an attorney named Patricia Vance, who had a reputation for aggressive representation, but the evidence was overwhelming, and the post-nup was exactly as ironclad as Cynthia had promised. Patricia tried everything, challenged the admissibility of the messages, argued the post-nup was outdated, claimed Meredith deserved equitable distribution regardless of the infidelity clause because she'd contributed equally to the marriage. Cynthia dismantled each argument with surgical precision. The end hearing was scheduled for early December. The judge, a man in his 60s who'd clearly seen every variation of marital collapse imaginable, reviewed the evidence with tired efficiency. When he delivered his ruling, it was exactly what Cynthia predicted. The post-nup would be enforced, the house would be awarded to me, the majority of joint assets would be split according to the breach provisions. Meredith sat perfectly still as the judge read the verdict. But even as the words settled into the courtroom, something didn't feel finished. This was the outcome I'd worked toward, the justice I'd earned. So why did it feel like I was still waiting for something I couldn't name?
2 weeks after the ruling, Meredith sent me a message, not a text, not an email, a handwritten letter delivered to Owen's townhouse by courier. The envelope was cream-colored, expensive, the kind of stationery she used for thank-you notes to important clients. I almost threw it away unopened, but something made me read it. Maybe curiosity, maybe the need to see how she'd frame her own destruction now that the dust had settled. The letter was short, no excuses, no manipulation, no attempt to relitigate what the court had already decided, just a request. She wanted to meet, one last time, not to argue or bargain or plead her case. She said she needed to understand something, and I was the only person who could help her understand it. I should have ignored it. Cynthia would have told me to ignore it. Owen definitely told me to ignore it. But I agreed anyway. We met at a park near Dilworth, neutral ground, public space, nowhere near the house that now belonged solely to me. She was already there when I arrived, sitting on a bench overlooking a small pond. She looked different, smaller somehow, like the confidence that had always defined her had been surgically removed. She didn't stand when I approached, just looked up at me with eyes that had lost their sharpness. "Thank you for coming." I sat on the opposite end of the bench. "What do you need to understand?" She was quiet for a long moment, watching the water. "I keep replaying everything," she finally said. "Every decision, every message, every moment I convinced myself I was being smart when I was actually being stupid." She turned to look at me. "But the thing I can't figure out, the thing that keeps me awake at night—" She paused, and I saw something in her expression I'd never seen before, genuine uncertainty. "Did you ever actually love me, or was I always just a role you were playing too?" The question hit harder than I expected, because the honest answer wasn't simple. It wasn't clean, it wasn't the satisfying narrative of a villain getting what she deserved and a hero walking away victorious. The honest answer required me to admit things about myself I hadn't fully examined, about the ways I'd contributed to our distance, about the version of our marriage I'd been willing to accept because it was easier than confronting what we'd become. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She wasn't asking for another chance. She was asking if any of it had been real. And I realized, sitting on that bench with the woman who'd betrayed me, that my answer would determine something important, not for her, but for me.
I could tell her the truth, all of it, the love that was real and the resentment that had grown, and the relief I'd felt when she'd finally given me permission to stop pretending. Or I could give her nothing, walk away with my victory intact, and let her spend the rest of her life wondering. The silence stretched between us. She waited, and I opened my mouth to answer. Tell me which part of this story hit you the hardest. I read every comment. Let me know where you're watching from tonight. If you want more stories like this, you already know what to do. And if you think this is where it ends, it's not. There's another story waiting that will make this feel even heavier. Click the video on your screen. I'll meet you there.